Okay, now take a look at John chapter 1, verses 15 and 16. Excuse me. And John 1:15 says this, John bore witness of him and cried out, saying, This was he of whom I said, He who comes after me is preferred before me, for he was before me. So John the Baptist testified three things here about Jesus Christ. He comes before me, he is preferred before me. He comes after me, He comes after me, he was preferred before me, he was before me. So he comes after me. John was on the scene in Israel before Jesus was. John's ministry came first. Jesus' time of ministry came after John's time. He comes after me in the sequence of earthly ministry, he means. But he is preferred before me. He is more important than me. You have listened to me. You should give as much or more attention to what he says. He is superior. He is greater. He's preferred before me, so listen to him. He's preferred before me. He has the greater favor of God. And he was before me. This indicates that John the Baptist understood the divine nature of Jesus Christ, that he was the Word made flesh, that he existed long before he became a man. And John 1:16 says, And of his fullness we have all received, and grace for grace. So who is the we in the phrase that we have all received his fullness? I guess that means we who have known him. That's we who have known him. We have received grace for grace. And what have we received? His fullness. And what is that? Let's look in Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 through 19. It says this, He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created through him and for him, and he is before all things, and in him all things consist. And he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he may have the preeminence. For it pleased the Father that in him all the fullness should dwell, and by him to reconcile all things to himself, by him, whether things on heaven or on earth, having made peace through his blood of his cross. So it pleased the Father that in him, in Jesus, all the fullness of God should dwell and live. So the completeness of everything is in Jesus Christ. And Colossians 1 verse 19 tells us that in Jesus all the fullness of God lives. And this is that fullness of John 1:15 which we have received. It's the fullness of all that God is and has to offer us. It's an amazing statement, and it's kind of mind-blowing. Let's read that again. It says in John 1:16, And of his fullness we have all received, and grace for grace. Those of us who have come to know him, those of us who are being saved by him, we have received his fullness. What all that means is kind of beyond my imagination, because there's so much to that. The fullness of God is infinite, right? So we can only imagine some of it. And I suppose we'll gradually learn what this means over millions and millions of years, and we'll still not know it all. And then it says, grace for grace. It means grace piled upon grace. And the background for this double term of grace for grace is really found in Exodus from chapters 32 through 34, where it's kind of shown that the people of God have received grace, but they need more grace. So it's grace after grace after grace. The grace keeps coming in big piles of grace. I love it, and it's expressed more clearly in Exodus 33:13, where Moses is praying, and he says this, Now therefore I pray, I have found grace in your sight. Show me now your way, that I may know you, and that I might find grace in your sight. And consider that this nation is your people. So he prayed this prayer to God. It's a plea to know him better, a plea to help him serve him better, a plea to help him to be shown God's way. It's a plea for grace on top of grace that's already been given. He admits already he's received grace and says he needs more. And we know in the Old Testament days, because the sacrifices that were made for sin were so incomplete in what they could do with removing sin, that they had to be made over and over and over again. And we have this grace upon grace in one sacrifice with Jesus Christ himself.